to the Flightcast, a place where opinions aren't right or wrong, and where we can agree or disagree about movies, TV, and other assorted media because it's all subjective. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to warn you right off the bat, people, this is going to be a DC Studios heavy week, and I'm pretty sure most of you are already aware of why. In fact, you might be wondering, why in the hell is Ray recording an episode now on Tuesday when we know that the main event is going to be on Thursday? Oh, don't worry. There will be another episode, probably a flight alert, covering whatever happens on that day. And I say whatever happens, we know exactly what's going to happen on that day. But listen, DC Studios heavy this week, Superman heavy this week. So heavy that, quite honestly, what I want to talk about in today's episode that I just heard and found out about today, I definitely want to cover now so that we can talk all about the trailer on Thursday. For people who do not know, we are getting the first teaser trailer for Superman on Thursday. That is happening. But today, a decent amount of set reviews, like visits to the set, if you will, those pieces, did get published and were posted today. And there's a couple that I want to read from and go through. One that was sent by a good friend of the program, Brooklyn Batman, Anthony. He sent me the link. He shared it with me and Tim from Squadcast Media, because we're both on Blue Sky. We're all on Blue Sky. A lot of you are on Blue Sky, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And there have been a number of you, if you're listening to the show now, that I reconnected with on Blue Sky, and it's great to reconnect with a number of you that I missed from the Twitter days, right? From back when Twitter used to be Twitter, when it used to be, halfway decent and not the Nazi-ridden cesspool that it is now. Whatever. It is what it is. We'll leave that there. But I'm glad to reconnect with a number of you on Blue Sky. Glad that we could, cross paths again. It's awesome. Let's move forward. Let's go into some good geeky shit going on here. So yeah, tons of DC stuff to talk about. That is going to be the focus of this episode. That's going to be the focus of Thursday's episode. The one day that I'm going to record something this week that won't be DC centric will be over the weekend, because I am definitely going to be binging and recording a Flightbox episode for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 5, the 5th and final season. The finale is this week, and I haven't watched any of it, and I've tried to stay in the bubble. Haven't really done that great of a job of it with respect to the penultimate episode. Apparently a lot of crazy shit happened in that episode, and I don't know all of it. There's a few things that I didn't mean to know, but that's the wonders of social media being no spoiler moratorium, right? We've talked about that before. It is what it is. It's okay. I will binge it this weekend, and I will definitely do a Flightbox review of Season 5. I'm going to do that this weekend. But the entire rest of the week, DC stuff. But of course, where can you find that? Well, I want to make some new announcements here. First of all, you can find this show and all of my other shows and my blog that I really need to get back into writing at theflightcast.com. You can also now find all my shows on Apple Podcasts. You can find them on YouTube at the Flightcast YouTube channel. And now you can also find them on Spotify and Pandora. That's right. The Flightcast is on both Spotify and Pandora. Go look it up. It's official. It's there. I am finally on those two mediums. Why the hell it took me so long to get on Pandora and Spotify, I don't know. But the Flightcast is totally there now. Stay tuned for new episodes if you are Spotify or Pandora customers. I didn't know that many people still had Pandora. But cool. The Flightcast is there. So, Apple Podcast, YouTube channel, Spotify, Pandora. That's where you can find my show. Or, of course, just come here to theflightcast.com and listen to it here. Either way, like and subscribe. Really appreciate it. And, of course, also want to take a moment to thank everybody that is a very loyal supporter of patreon.com/theflightcast. Those of you that are flight officers, thank you so much for your support. I hope that you are enjoying my current series. For people that do not know, I am doing a series right now, 12 days of flight review on Patreon. I am reviewing my top 12 favorite Christmas movies. 12 of my favorite Christmas movies in that regard. And I'm going in descending order. As of the time of this episode, I've posted 5. I've posted the first 5 days, first 5 flight reviews. And just to give you a heads up, so far I've done Ernest Saves Christmas was the first one that I did on day 1. I also reviewed Die Hard, and I gave a very impassioned argument as to why that's a Christmas movie, because it is. Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I also reviewed Home Alone 1 and 2. I talked about why I think Home Alone 2 is light years better than the first one, even though I do enjoy both films, why I like the sequel a hell of a lot better. And earlier today, I posted my review of The Santa Claus. So between now and through Christmas Eve, there are 7 more coming. And I will tease this. I will let you know that tomorrow's review, at Wednesday's review, if you will, that is going to be a review of a Christmas movie that I have never seen before. That's a brand new one that I have never seen before. I'll be watching it for the first time to see exactly what my raw thoughts on it. But it's one that a lot of people have seen, one that a lot of people have had some positive and, in some cases, mixed reactions to. And then the day after that, on Thursday, I will be posting a review of a Christmas movie that when I first watched it, way back when, I hated it. Me and my buddy Jordan at the time went to go see it in the theater. We hated it. We did not like it. We did not care for it. I am giving it another shot as an adult. As an elder millennial in my early 40s, I am giving this Christmas movie another shot because so many people love it. It is like it is a favorite. It is a Christmas classic now. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm seeing too many people quote it. I'm seeing too many people talk about how it's their favorite Christmas movie ever. I need to give this movie another shot. This is a movie that I did see in theaters a number of years ago. And it might even be your favorite Christmas movie. And on Thursday, I'm going to give it another watch, and I'm going to see how I feel about it. Maybe I like it, maybe I don't. We'll see how that goes. But that's upcoming. So, 12 days of flight review, 12 movies in all. There's 7 more that I have to go. There's 5 that have been posted so far at patreon.com/theflightcast. And at least one of them is a movie, like I said, tomorrow that I've never seen before. And another one, a movie that I hated. And I mean flat out did not like at all. That I am going to revisit and give another shot. And we'll see how I feel about it coming up on Thursday. So stay tuned for that. Those of you who are loyal patrons at patreon.com/theflightcast, hope you're enjoying the series, 12 days of flight review for the Christmas season. Hope you're enjoying it. Thank you so much for your support. And if anybody wishes to get in on that, go to patreon.com/theflightcast and sign up to be a flight officer, and you'll get access to that bonus content and tons of other bonus content that is available and more that will be coming after I'm done with my 12 days of flight review. So there you have it at patreon.com/theflightcast. Thank you so much for your support. It is indeed greatly appreciated. All right, so let's dive into this DC stuff, this Superman stuff head first. And listen, first things first, we got to talk about the motion image that was released yesterday along with some music. Now, first of all, the motion image, the first official image of David Corenswet in the Superman suit, which has made the rounds. You know, we had it on our newscast earlier today at my job. Like, it's everywhere now. It is the big debut. It looks gorgeous now, doesn't it? It's a fantastic image, seriously. A lot of the colors, the way that you know, the way that they've decided to do the blending and the hues does remind me a little bit of like Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is good because I really like the poster effects and the colors from that one. And the way that the costume looks and the way that he is poised in this image, it looks awesome. I mean, this is standard Superman awesomeness, right? Isn't it? And the thing is, you don't have to do much with a first official image of Superman, right? You just have to do what they did in this image. It's very simple. It's colors, it's grandiose, it's, you know, the heroic pose that we were talking about. You know, it's not hands on hips, but still it's the flight pose, right? And just, you know, the lettering and just the words "look up." I mean, it's gorgeous. Seriously, it is absolutely gorgeous. James Gunn posted this on all of his socials. He posted this on BLUESKY because he is on BLUESKY, and he has been posting stuff on BLUESKY for the last month or so, I would say. We're all following him. I wish that BLUESKY had like one of those, you know how like they have on Twitter/X where you can get notified when certain accounts post things. They don't have that for BLUESKY. I wish they did because I would love to be notified when James Gunn posts stuff. But at any rate, I saw it. We've all seen it, right? You know, the lettering, the DC Studios logo. Oh, gorgeous, fantastic. You know, and I have said before that I did like the logo that they were using, and that, you know, I didn't need them to change it back to the Bullet logo, but I totally get why. I like how they did it at the end here, like the shimmering, like metallic version of the DC Studios logo. And again, can we just one more time celebrate the fact that DC Studios exists as an autonomous entity, right? We don't have to dream about it anymore. We don't have to make that. Like, I remember a couple years ago when I was talking about how DC Studios should exist. Like, I took the Marvel Studios image and I made a mock-up of a DC Studios logo. I don't have to do that anymore because now it actually exists. It is real. DC Studios is a real entity, and it is bringing us its first cinematic glory, hopefully, if you will. And if this is the beginning of it, it looks fantastic. I mean, we will see with that teaser trailer, which again, I will definitely be posting another episode about that on Thursday when it drops. Don't worry about that. We're going to talk about it. No doubt we're going to talk about it. But here's what we really need to talk about with respect to this motion image. And it is the music that is playing along with this. Now, I will be 1,000% honest with all of you. I know what the headlines are saying. I know what you guys have been saying. I have to be 1,000% straight with you. This is the honest to Zod truth. The first 2 times I heard the music, I did not hear the Williams theme. I did not hear the Williams theme. If anything, the vocalizations I heard, it did remind me of Man of Steel. It did. It reminded me of Man of Steel, even though I knew it wasn't Man of Steel. And this is where I've been talking to people. I don't know. This is the phrase that I'm about to say could be a little bit loaded. I've been talking to people on Reddit. Yeah, I know that's a dangerous thing, especially with me, because you would have thought that like YouTube comment sections and, social media itself would have been bad enough for me. But now I am like wading into Reddit waters, and I'm in a couple of different Reddit forums, to be honest with you. Seriously, I don't know. But I was telling people on Reddit who were just so enamored with the Williams theme. Oh, the Williams theme is back again, because that discussion popped back up again, right? And I was telling people initially, it's like, I don't hear it. I think you all really want to hear the Williams theme. And they're like, I don't know what to tell you, man. It's right there in between, what was it, like 32 seconds, like towards the end of it, right? And so the 3rd or 4th time I listened to it, now I'm looking for it. I'm looking for that Williams theme, and I'm like, okay, now I hear it in the vocalizations. It's in the same key, and that was the other thing, like, because people, I don't know if people realize that, like, the John Williams theme for Superman 70, for Superman the movie, we need to start calling it Superman the movie. It's not Superman 78. Superman the movie, the John Williams theme that he made for that in 1978, and Man of Steel, the theme that Zimmer did for Man of Steel, they're both in the same key, right? So that's why I remember some years ago, I found somebody that did a mashup of the Man of Steel and Williams theme, and it was seamless because they were basically the same rhythm, and they were basically the same tempo, and they were totally in the same key, right? So there is something to be said about that particular key musically for Superman, right? I think Shirley Walker deviated from it massively with Superman the Animated Series, which that's a great theme in its own right, but at any rate. So I didn't hear it at first, and then when everybody started saying it was there, I listened for it, and then I heard it. Yes, I do hear it. It is there. But kind of my point with respect to the music is I guarantee that a decent amount of the general audience, and to clarify, we don't know that what we hear in this motion image is the final score. We don't know that. I know that we're kind of conditioned to believe that because that's what Matt Reeves and Michael Giacchino did with the Batman when we got that first camera test of Robert Pattinson and the Batman, the red and black shot, before COVID, believe it or not, that's how long ago it was. When we first got that shot, we got the first beginnings of the theme for the Batman, and that totally was the theme for the Batman. And am I saying that we should be expecting the same for this? I don't know. I'm not sure. I will tell you that if the theme that we do end up getting for Superman is just another clone of the John Williams score, that will be disappointing. It will. It will be very disappointing for me because I do want David Cornsweet Superman, I want James Gunn Superman to have a different score because I think Superman deserves the right to have different scores. And of course, this ignited the debate yet again because you have the sector, the Superman gatekeepers that believe the Danny Elfman logic. I'm calling it the Danny Elfman Justice League logic because remember when Danny Elfman said before Justice League released in 2017, he said that Batman only has one theme. There's only one theme for Batman. And remember, everybody hated him for that? Not everybody, but a lot of people hated him for that stodginess because it didn't work. The Michael Keaton Batman theme for Tim Burton's films did not work with Ben Affleck's Batman. It didn't work in that setting and tone whatsoever. It stuck out like a sore thumb. And so did him reusing the Williams theme for Cavill's Superman in that film as well. That abomination that is Justice League that I will never watch ever again in life. But my point is, you got Superman gatekeepers that are acting the same way about the Williams theme. And it's not everybody. It's just the gatekeepers that want to believe that and want to say that it should only ever be the Williams theme. It's iconic. It's what everybody symbolizes with the character. It's the only one that he should ever have. And people are they keep throwing the James Bond example at me because I keep saying that, Superman shouldn't be shackled to one theme from one interpretation of the character, and they throw Bond at me like, well, what about Bond? He has the theme for all of them throughout all the actors. That is not an accurate example. That's not an accurate comparison whatsoever. For one thing, the character of James Bond does not change massively between actor portrayals, right? All the actors that play James Bond throughout the 25 films that he's played him are essentially the same character. Even Craig's version, which is technically a reboot, what it is he's the beginnings of the character that Bond becomes in the Connery years, in the Roger Moore years, in the Timothy Dalton and Pierce Brosnan years, even George Lazenby, right? Like, they're all playing the same character. Like, the tone doesn't change. The tone of Bond is still pretty much the same as far as the character itself, as far as M and Moneypenny and Q and MI6 and all that. It's pretty much the same through 25 movies. That is not the case with Superman. And I would put this to people like, say you're a fan of Superman comics. Are you telling me that you believe that John Byrne's Superman, as a writer, you think his Superman is exactly the same as Dan Jurgens? Are either of them exactly the same as Peter Tomasi or Brian Michael Bendis or anybody else that has written Superman? Because that's what your argument is. Your argument is that their interpretations of Superman are the same and that they should all have the same theme and they should all have the same sound. Bullshit. I don't subscribe to that whatsoever. And you know what? We can absolutely agree to disagree. It is all subjective for sure. But no, I don't want this Superman to be shackled to that theme. And again, all it takes is just one thing, right? They felt this way about the Trunks coming back, and they feel this way about the Williams theme being used. Oh my goodness, we're going back to hope. We're going back to Superman being a hopeful character, right? I saw this earlier on Blue Sky, and I'm totally going to mention this here because I saw somebody post on Blue Sky. It was a quote. I don't know where they got this image from. DC Film News, I guess. It was an account at Otter272, and he posts this image, said, Superman, DC Studios' first feature film to hit the big screen, is set to soar into theaters worldwide this summer from Warner Brothers Pictures. In his signature style, James Gunn takes on the original superhero in the newly imagined DC universe with a singular blend of epic action, humor, and heart, delivering a Superman who is driven by compassion and an inherent belief in the goodness of humankind. And this account, Otter272, like, he took the quotation at the end of it, delivering a Superman who's driven by compassion and an inherent belief in the goodness of humankind. And he put a bunch of hearts after it, and he says, thanks you, and he tagged James Gunn in it. And so I quoted this, and I said, FYI, both cinematic versions of Superman to this point have been driven by compassion and an inherent belief in the goodness of humankind. David Corenswet will be the third big-screen Superman to be portrayed like this. So thank you, Richard Donner, rest in peace, Zack Snyder, and James Gunn. And I put a heart emoji after that. Because, yeah, we're not doing this revisionist history. I know what the gatekeepers are trying to do. We all have been preparing for this, right? We knew this, over a year ago, like however long ago when we found out this was happening, we knew it was going to happen. We knew that the gatekeepers that, clutched their Superman the movie pearls from 1978, we knew that they were going to jump all over the opportunity to say, thank you for returning Superman to goodness, inherent goodness, and the compassion, right? Because you've rescued him from the clutches of that evil man, Zack Snyder, and his murderverse. Yeah, that bullshit. We knew that was coming. And here it is, rearing its head. We're probably going to, when that trailer comes out on Thursday, that's part of what we're going to be dealing with. Now, fortunately, I haven't seen a whole lot of that ridiculousness on Blue Sky. There's probably a decent amount of it on Twitter. Scott was saying in our group chat for Squadcast Media that there really wasn't a whole lot of it. Okay, fine. But there shouldn't be any fighting and there shouldn't be any tribalism in that regard. But that's why I always get concerned whenever, elements of the Donner films, elements of the Christopher Reeve films or the Williams theme or anything like that get used even in promotional material, because that's all it takes for the gatekeepers to rear their ugly heads and turn this into tribalist bullshit again, right? And I know some of you agree with me on this. Anthony Dorsey, I know you agree with me. We've had conversations. I know how you feel about that Williams theme. How you feel about it here, I can only imagine what your thoughts on it are. I can't wait to hear what you have to think about it. Yes, at some point I will do a catch-up episode of Flight Chat. That's going to happen. We have not done any feedback in a good long while, and there is a buildup of emails. Alex De Silva, I have noted the 3 emails that you have sent to this point. We will get caught up at some point. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, I don't really care for the fact that there's a reused version or a remodified version of the Williams theme in here. And, for the people that want to argue that it's iconic and that that's how the general audience, that's how the audience is going to identify Superman, I really call bullshit on that, because I guarantee you, at this point, as I've said many times, the general audience does not care about the minutia the same way that we do as fans. And I guarantee you that if I show that motion clip to 10 people in the general audience, maybe, and I do mean maybe, 1 or 2, 3 max might catch it. Might catch that the Williams theme is at the very end of it. Maybe. They probably will be completely fooled by the fact that it's not trumpet fanfare and that it doesn't sound like it's vocalizations. It's vocalizations at the end of this music in the same key, right? But you caught it because you wanted to catch it. Whether you admit that or not, I think you wanted to catch it. Any one of us, like I heard it, again, Man of Steel is what I heard first. And I didn't hear Man of Steel. I heard something that sounded similar to Man of Steel. I didn't hear like the themes or anything. I would never sit there and be like, oh, well, that's clearly Man of Steel or that's clearly this, right? But for people that heard the Williams theme right off the bat, you're the fans that inherently on subconscious level wanted to hear it. And you heard it. And then you pointed it out. And then as soon as you pointed out, it was like breaking the glass ceiling. It was like shattering the spoiler moratorium. Oh, okay, yeah. It is there. There it is. All right, fine. It is what it is. Whether James Gunn confirms that was it or not, I don't care. It's really not that big of a deal as far as that. But I do hope that we will get an original theme for David Cornsweet's Superman. It's not necessarily looking great if we were to infer anything from the music in this motion image, but we still got to wait and see. Even the music that we hear in the teaser trailer on Thursday, it still might not be the actual score. That score may not be finished. Probably is not finished to this point. Maybe it is. I don't know. I depending on the process and how it goes. But in fact, quite honestly, I think Gunn has talked in the process before about how with his films they have done like the scoring first beforehand, and then they match it up later. So maybe that's the case. I don't know. But either way, I hope we get an original score. I hope that it isn't just a lazy retread of the Williams theme merged with Man of Steel. I don't want that. I want this Superman to be his own. I want Cornsweet to be his own. Yes, okay, have Easter eggs and harken back to whatever Donner did and what Zack Snyder did as well. Go ahead and do that. But I don't need this to be a retread. Because again, the general audience could give less than two shits about this largely. Seriously. Only the fans, only the 5 to 10% of the audience, if we're lucky, care about what theme is used, right? So enough with this argument that, you've got to use it, because we've seen already that nostalgia from 40 years ago does not work, okay? We saw that with The Flash. The nostalgia for Batman did not work with that film. We saw it with Superman Returns, people, in 2006. That nostalgia didn't work, and that was 19 years removed from the last Christopher Reeve Superman film, and it didn't work then. And you're telling me that a 47-year connection to a theme is going to work for a general audience that is at least 2 generations removed from that particular incarnation of Superman? Come on. Seriously, I don't think that's very realistic. But you know what? Fans are going to feel however they feel, and we can agree to disagree because, again, it is all subjective. But that's really the long and short of it with respect to that. The image is gorgeous. I love it. The music itself is gorgeous. I just didn't need the Williams theme to be in it. I didn't. And that's not me being negative. It doesn't necessarily, bother me, but I do hope that it's not a symbol of what the score is going to be, because I don't need this to be Williams' retread. And hopefully, with what I'm about to talk about next, it's not going to be Williams' retread. Because today, the day after the release of the motion image, a number of publications posted their set visit articles, their visits to the set of Superman. And this includes a good amount of quotes and information from James Gunn himself. As Anthony, Brooklyn Batman, put it, some minor spoilers, perhaps. And spoilers, I guess we would count as anything that, wasn't officially released, but this is James Gunn being quoted. So if there are details, minor details about this movie that you really don't want known, then I guess you can not listen to this. But I do want to focus on some of what he said. I do want to focus on really these pieces and here glean some things of what he said, because Anthony was saying that he's saying all the right things with respect to what's going on. And there were some quotes that Anthony highlighted that I definitely wanted to talk about, but we'll start. There's 2 pieces here in particular that I found. First one from Anthony. It comes from IGN. Now, look, IGN is a source. I don't like them. I think they are very, very biased, and I think they really don't know what the hell they're talking about a lot of the time. But we're going to put that aside, and never mind that it's an IGN source. We're going to focus on the James Gunn portions, if you will. We're going to focus on all of the information that we glean from him with respect to that, right? So this piece from IGN is entitled, James Gunn is, quote, giving up everything in my life and soul, end quote, to make Superman. The writer-director of DC's new Superman reboot explains his passion for the Man of Steel. All right, so I don't want to read like this whole thing verbatim like I've done before in the past, but I do want to focus on like the quotes. Now that quote in particular, where he says, quote, just giving up everything in my life and soul, literally. I'm miserable, frankly. Really, I'm miserable, but hopefully it's for the greater good. And it says it's a typically candid admission from a director who's never been afraid to speak his mind in interviews and online. It's also one that's at least somewhat made with tongue planted in cheek, a way of blowing off steam after a hard few weeks on the sweltering hot set. But though Gunn may have been feeling the pressure of the job that day, it's obvious that he's deeply passionate about his Superman reboot. And yeah, we've talked about this before, guys, with respect to the massive pressure that is on James Gunn, not just for this movie, but also for the soul of his franchise and DC Studios as a whole, right? A lot is riding on this. Everything is riding on this. DC Studios, the future of that, the future of the DCU and his Gods and Monsters plan for the next 8 to 10 years, all of it rests on this film. This film must succeed. He knows this. Peter Safran knows this. David Zaslav, for all of his buffoonery, knows this. Everybody, we all know this. There is no DCU, there is no real future for DC Studios in this current incarnation if the first film, Superman, doesn't work, right? If it doesn't sell, if the audience doesn't dig it in that regard. So that is a ton of pressure. I can completely understand why James Gunn would be miserable, right? And he says hopefully it's for the greater good, because he's hoping that this will work. He's hoping that it will capture the audience. He's hoping that it will appropriately and effectively launch the DCU going forward for DC Studios, and that they can continue on with the rest of their plan. Yeah, but it's a lot of pressure. It is. It's a ton of pressure. Like, he's been given the keys to the kingdom, right? The big DC kingdom. Not only that, but, I had this conversation with some coworkers earlier today at my station, and when this came up in the news, right, we were talking about DC, and, one of our anchors had made a comment about how he had felt like this reboot was happening because the last couple of Superman movies had bombed. And, my eye, of course, started twitching when he said that over the air. I couldn't correct him live over the air because I was standing behind cameras. But I did afterwards say, okay, technically Man of Steel and Batman v Superman did make money, right? They were successful films. And, of course, he fires back with it. That doesn't mean that they were good. And I'm like, you know what? I don't give a shit. I love those movies. I really appreciate those movies. I love every last bit of them. And he's like, you're not objective. What did I tell him? What did I tell him when he said I wasn't objective? I said, well, I didn't quite say it's all subjective. I could have, but I said nobody is objective, because that's very true. Nobody is objective. And he agreed with me on that. And I left it at that. Well, okay, I didn't completely leave it at that. After we did some other work business, I said, listen, this is because one of the other things he brought up was the idea that superheroes are getting oversaturated, and he's kind of getting tired of superhero movies, right? He's one of those audience members. Like, I don't know. It's tough for me to say that many people that work for a TV station, at least ones that watch movies, are part of the general audience, but there's a decent amount of TV employees that are general audience. But at any rate, I was saying that this is an opportunity, because with Marvel movies, like, the oversaturation really came about with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the oversaturation that people are concerned about. And now that is kind of falling out of favor, or at least, in lower points, not dire straits. Marvel has never been in dire straits, not since the beginning of Marvel Studios. But now that it's kind of a downturn and we're in this holding pattern, right, outside of Deadpool and Wolverine, right? This is an opportunity, and we've said this before, for James Gunn and Peter Safran and DC Studios to present something different that is not like the MCU, to capture the audience's attention again and take them on a different ride for superhero films. And that just adds to the pressure here, because Gunn is attempting to seize an opportunity with this Superman film and with the DCU and with DC Studios that hopefully will draw those fans in and give them something fresh and different to watch, that isn't just standard MCU or DCEU fare that we've seen in the last 10, 15 years in that regard, right? So I understand all of the pressure with respect to this that is on James Gunn. But this particular IGN piece says they've got 10 things that they learned about the new movie straight from the director himself. And it starts with this. On casting David Corenswet, it says, he said, quote, "I've always believed that the casting is the most important, and that as long as the actor is the best possible actor for that role, that's more important than it is for a name," he says. Especially in today's market, which is, you see, movie stars are not the same as they used to be in terms of, you can't, like what it was 15 years ago, open up a Melissa McCarthy movie, he says. Instantly, you're going to make this much money. Open up an Adam Sandler movie. Instantly, you're going to make this much money. It's not like that anymore, so I just wanted to go for who was the best Superman, he said. Gunn continues, he says, "A lot of people auditioned, and the weird thing is I was so crazily nervous about getting Superman ready on the very first day of the tapes coming in. I had seen Corenswet in Pearl, so I said, get him on the tape. And then the very first day came in David's tape and Rachel's tape, and I saw both of those, and I went, oh my God, we're going to be okay. Because both of these people are amazing," he says. There were other really good actors for both of those roles, but at the end of the day, it was both of them as individuals. Then we did something that I didn't do with Guardians, which is I cast the two leads together, and they all came in, and we had this 15-minute long scene that they all have to act together and talk and discuss and just communicate. And I mixed and matched all the different couples, and it was simple magic when the two of them came up. I gotta say, it's one of my greatest moments in filmmaking, end quote. So there you have it with respect to that, as far as his thoughts on the chemistry between David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan, with respect to the Clark and Lois dynamic. But getting into what he says about Clark, he says, quote, "It's not just Clark, it's not just Superman, it's Clark/Superman. And the only people that know Clark/Superman are his mom and his dad and a few others who know who he is, and those are very different things," Gunn says. People said all sorts of different things. They said Clark's the real one. They said Superman's the real one, and Clark's the secret identity. But I don't, he says. And it says it in my script on the second page. I don't believe either of those things. I don't think anybody knows Superman unless they know both of him. And when they know both of him, they know the real guy. And that means not too many people. Now, there's two things with this. One, I love that, because that is different, right? Because throughout, whether it was Christopher Reeve, whether it was Henry Cavill, throughout either of the previous two cinematic interpretations of Superman that we've had in our lifetime, it has been that debate. It has been that question. Is he really Clark? Is he really Superman? Which one is the real character? And Gunn is saying it's both. You got to understand both, which is why not that many people know who he is. That's the first thing that I really like about this. But here's the other telling thing that came out of that. You hear what he said about how the only people that know Clark/Superman are his mom and his dad, and a few others who know who he is. Oh, his mom and his dad. Now, we already knew that they had cast a Pa Kent, but now we know for certain, for complete virtual certainty, that at least at this point in the story that we're watching, Pa Kent has seen him as Superman. Jonathan Kent is alive. That is already different than both Superman the movie and Man of Steel. Great. Fantastic. That was something that I didn't know, right, until I talked to Scott and the others at Squadcast Media, and they told me that, no, there's actually quite a few comics where, like, both Martha and Jonathan are alive in that regard. Because somebody like me that grew up with Superman the movie, I'm only used to Jonathan being dead before he even becomes Superman, right? And that continued with Man of Steel. But we're now dealing with a Superman film where we're going to see Ma and Pa Kent during the Superman era. Fantastic. Outstanding. Love it. Those are the two biggest things that I take out of all of that part. So there's that aspect of it. Then it says Superman and Lex Luthor, and this is where we get into the minor spoilery part of this, if you will. But it says Superman and Lex Luthor don't know each other yet. It says Gunn has been adamant about from the beginning that he has no interest in rehashing Superman's origin story. He's as sick of superhero origins as the fans are. Superman has pointedly set several years into Clark Kent's career as a costumed hero. Corenswet's Superman is an established hero at this point, though he's still cultivating the relationships that will come to define him. And yeah, that is something that I think we've all gleaned and, found out throughout all the information and whatnot that we've been taking from the production, if you will. It says one of those relationships is his rivalry with Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor. Surprisingly, though, this film is set several years after Superman's initial debut. Clark has yet to really clash with Metropolis's favorite tech billionaire. The two men are aware of each other's existence, but only now does Lex begin making moves against the Man of Steel. Quote, Gunn says it was about really putting us in the middle of the action from the beginning. And there's a lot of these things in this movie now that I've been making it for over a year that I think of as normal. But now when you bring it up, I go, oh yeah, that's pretty unusual. We just start in the middle of the action. Superman's already existing. Lois and Clark already know each other. Lex hates Superman's guts from the beginning, although they don't know each other personally. So we start right in the middle of the action. It takes place over a short amount of time. I also love that because that's also very different than what we've had. Not your typical traditional origin story. And I know there are plenty of people that are still doubting that. But right there from the horse's mouth, he says, no, we're starting in the middle. Good, because nobody has started in the middle yet. The DCEU didn't start in the middle. The MCU certainly didn't start in the middle. It started from the beginning, right? We've seen all the origin stories. I said somebody even on Reddit earlier today was saying, they had a list of things. We're going to see the destruction of Krypton again. We're going to see the death of Jonathan Kent again. Da-da-da-da. It's just going to be Batman with a different color palette. And I think that's not the case. I think James Gunn is going to give us something different. I will take him at his word for this. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to see the destruction of Krypton at some point. Maybe we will. But perhaps we won't see the death of Jonathan Kent. At least we're not going to see it before he becomes Superman because he's going to know that he's Superman. So that's cool. I love that. Moving on. It says, and this is one that I know like Tim over at Squadcast Media and a number of you probably, this is going to be one that really you're going to hold the movie's feet to the fire on this. It says it's less comedic than the Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy. And it says, fans have certainly come to expect a certain type of superhero movie from Gunn in the wake of 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies and 2021's The Suicide Squad. Tonally, those movies are extremely comedic with plenty of quippy dialogue and a lot of interpersonal banter. Superman isn't quite that. Gunn makes it clear that while this new film definitely has its humorous moments, the tone is more earnest and fanciful than fans might be expecting. Quote, it's humorous, but it certainly is not as comic or as much a comedy as either Suicide Squad or Guardians, Gunn says. There's plenty of humor in it. People like Rachel Brosnahan are so funny, and David Cornsweet is very funny as well, so there's humor in it, but it's trying to create something that is grounded, but also it's an incredibly fanciful world. It's fantasy. It's taken from other things like Game of Thrones, where it's this universe where superheroes actually exist. What are they like? There's a magic there that's undeniable. Again, this is totally in I'll believe it when I see it territory, and I'm kind of there. I mean, to me, I'm inclined to take James Gunn at his word for a lot of this stuff because I do buy that he is a fan. I do believe that he is a student of the source material, and I do believe that he understands the difference between Superman and the Guardians of the Galaxy or the Suicide Squad. So from the beginning, I've always given him just a little bit more benefit of the doubt that he's not going to make a dick and fart joke Superman movie that's filled with a bunch of stupid humor. I'm not expecting fat Thor level jokes or even Aquaman jokes in this movie. I'm not expecting that. Maybe there might be one or two, but I don't know. I don't even know that we're going to get that, truthfully. I think this really is going to be a different style. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, right? And then all the Gunn haters can revel in that and say, you see, he just made a Superman comedy film. That's all it is. A lot of the haters are going to see whatever they want, but we will find out in, 7 months, right? We'll find out soon enough. Less than 7 months at this point, because we're past December 11th. But continuing, it also says the soundtrack is less song-driven. It says, similarly, the Guardians movies are notable for their soundtracks, which inject plenty of iconic classic rock tunes into a cosmic sci-fi setting. Superman isn't following the same approach, it says. While the film will feature a handful of songs handpicked by Gunn naturally, the emphasis is far more on composer John Murphy's score. That score will invoke the iconic work of John Williams at times, but it also blazes its own trail with the franchise. Quote, there's nods to Williams, and then also John Murphy's created this incredibly beautiful score, Gunn says. But the one thing is, it is a score. It's not a soundtrack, so it's not about the songs. There's a few songs in it, and of course, I chose those songs beforehand, but it isn't like any of my previous movies really in terms of the score is what drives it. It's a much, much more of a score film. Okay, so here's the deal with this, because this goes back to my concern with the music in the motion image, the motion poster, right? If he's right, and it says that there are nods to Williams here and there, but that if the score is mostly its own, if John Murphy has created something that is mostly its own beast, and we can detect that, right? Because you can tell when somebody's made a theme that's just, oh, this is a rehash of whatever, right? We saw it in Justice League when Danny Elfman rehashed the Batman theme and rehashed the Superman theme from John Williams, right? If we hear something from John Murphy that is still its own thing all the way through, and at times nods here and there to Williams, I will be okay with that. I will be happy. You know why? Because one, the gatekeepers will be sad because it won't actually be the Williams theme, and they'll try and cling to that little piece of it that we hear in the motion image, right? And I can, their anguish will sustain me because gatekeepers are the bane of fandom's existence as far as I'm concerned. And two, it will definitely give me a Superman that is blazing his own trail and is separating himself from the previous two versions. Like I said, I don't want this to look, feel, or sound like Superman the movie. I don't want it to feel exactly like Man of Steel either. I want this film to be different than the both of those. And that doesn't mean they can't have, like I said, they can have Easter eggs, they can have nods, but don't just be hackneyed. Don't just be lazy. Don't just copy and paste, please. So I really hope that, like I'm doing with other stuff, I could take Gunn at his word on this one. I truly hope so. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt on this. I'm going out on a limb here, going out a little bit of a limb here to defend James Gunn, because I know not everybody is high on him, and there are a number of you that are still questioning this, and I get it. I understand, but I am going to go out on that limb, and I'm going to give him a little bit of trust that he's going to give us something that will be different than what we've had to this point and won't just be a rehash. All right, here's a big one. Superman's costume, trunks or no trunks? Now, this is really interesting because we had that debate, right? We talked about trunks versus no trunks, and to hear this story that Gunn tells about how the trunks actually came to be, I think is very intriguing. And this actually is like, okay, you know what? Now I feel a lot better about the trunks, truthfully, after hearing this story, because it says that, obviously there's been a tendency over the past couple of decades to modernize Superman's appearance by eliminating his costume's red trunks. That was the approach taken by 2013's Man of Steel and subsequent DCEU films. But just as the trunks have made a comeback in the comics recently, Gunn is going retro by giving us a Superman who proudly wears his underwear on the outside. Yeah, thank you for that, IGN. But it says, that said, Gunn admits that he himself was divided on the trunks, no trunks debate. Initially, he leaned against including them until Cornswet made a convincing argument for their inclusion, and this is what I find intriguing. Here's Gunn's official quote. He says, "At the end of the day, it wasn't that heated. It was heated for a while. I was on the no trunks team for a long time. And Zack Snyder, said that when he was doing it, he tried a billion different trunk versions as we did, and I kept going back to no trunks. And I'm like, well, let's just grind it out. Let's just keep trying trunks and see what happens. And David said something to me, he said, that really affected me. We were trying on all these different versions, and we screen tested with trunks and no trunks. And one of the things David said is that Superman wants kids to not be afraid of him." Gunn continues, "He's an alien. He's got these incredible powers. He shoots beams out of his eyes, can blow the truck over. He's this incredibly powerful, could be considered scary individual, and he wants people to like him. He wants to be a symbol of hope and positivity. So he dresses like a professional wrestler. He dresses in a way that makes people unafraid of him, that shows that. And that really clicked in for me," he says. "And I think that trying to pretend that Superman's costume doesn't have some frivolity to it at its base, trying to make it look serious, is silly because he is a superhero. He's the first one brightly colored, and that's who he is. And so that's where we landed, and eventually we all came to a place where almost all of us agreed on the trunks." All right. The one thing that Gunn says in here that I don't agree with is trying to make it look serious is silly because he is a superhero. And the reason I disagree with that is obvious, because that's what Zack Snyder did in his trilogy. That's what he did at the beginning of the DCEU. He did make Superman serious. But there's room for that interpretation, right? There's nothing wrong with that interpretation. That's the whole point that any Zack Snyder fan of Henry Cavill's Superman has been trying to make for the last 10 plus years, is that it's okay to have a serious take on Superman. And that's what Man of Steel was. That's what Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition was. That's what Zack Snyder's Justice League was, right? They were building towards the fantastical, but they were still putting these larger-than-life God Among Insects DC characters and heroes in the real world and trying to make real world consequences and trying to make it, for lack of a better way to put it, as realistic and as gritty as possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. All the gatekeepers that want to act like that's not Superman, that they are objectively wrong. That is not a matter of opinion in that regard. It is Superman, they just don't like it. And that's fine if you don't like it. But I don't buy this whole argument that fans have been having, well, why can't we have a whimsical Superman again? You had it. You had it with Superman 78, with the Superman the movie and the Donner films. You had it in that realm. Don't act like we've never had it. We most certainly have in that regard. Now, Gunn is obviously going in a different direction. And even though I disagree with his statement about it looking silly to try and make Superman look serious, I at least buy the reasoning on why he was swayed over for Trunks. And that gives, and I like that it came from Cornyn's mind. I like that the actor himself gave the explanation and gave what I think is a logistically emotional argument for why he would wear Trunks, right? Because yes, this is an established Superman, right? This is not a rookie Superman. That's another thing people love to forget about Henry Cavill's version in Man of Steel, is that he's rookie Superman. He's literally been Superman for like 36 hours in Man of Steel by the time that the Black Zero event occurs with Zod in Metropolis, right? And then 18 months after that is BVS, and then he's dead, and then however long after that is when Zack Snyder's Justice League. So he's not an established veteran Superman by any stretch of the imagination throughout Zack Snyder's trilogy. That is objectively not going to be the case, according to what James Gunn has told us here in the DCU. This is an established Superman. This is a Superman that's been around for years in a world that is populated with existing superheroes. So yeah, the idea that he does want people to like him, that he is going to soften and put some more frills on his costume like Trunks in order for kids to like him. Yeah, I get that. I do. I absolutely get that. And to me, that's a better reason than that's a way better reason than fan service. Finding an actual in-character reason, and I love that Cornyn came up with this, because that means that if this comes up in the movie, like, he's going to believe it. It's going to come straight from his portrayal of the character. It's not going to be a mandate. It's not going to be anything, like a fan letter or the gatekeepers. It's not going to be there to make fans happy. It's going to be there because it serves what the character is doing, what this version of the character is doing. That is much better. If you're going to make a decision like that, I much rather it come organically from the story that you're telling, and certainly from the actor that is portraying the character whose story that you were telling. So I'm good with this. I am. This is the best I have felt, truthfully, about the Trunks being back on. And I don't dislike, I've seen the set photos, I know how it looks, and the look so far doesn't bother me. We'll see how it looks in the teaser trailer on Thursday in motion for the first time. But like, this is the best I have felt. I'm really glad that Gunn told this story and revealed that that's how Trunks came to be for this version of Superman. Great. Fantastic. Here's an intriguing one, and I will tell you, this gives me Cyborg, Zack Snyder's Justice League vibes, hearing this one. It says, Mr. Terrific is the most important supporting hero. Really? It says Superman may be about reintroducing audiences to the Man of Steel, but Superman is hardly the only costumed hero appearing in the film. Oh, we know this. There's an entire ensemble cast at play here, including members of the Justice League like Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner, Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl, and Edie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific. None of those are spoilers. Those have all been officially announced. Gunn notes that there wasn't any particular rhyme or reason to which DC characters he included beyond his personal attachments to the characters, though he did reveal that Mr. Terrific has the most prominent role in the film. Quote, I think it was just who I wanted to really use, honestly. I love Mr. Terrific, he says. These characters all get their moment in the sun. They all have their moments. They're not just cameos. These are the characters. They're supporting cast. But Mr. Terrific is the main character of those characters. He actually has a big part of the plot. And so that was fun. And of course, getting to work with Nathan is always something. And putting him in a stupid look, and then Isabella is great. I've been a fan of hers for a long time, but it was about balance. Now, I love all of that. The fact that he's considering them characters, supporting characters, and not cameos, great, fantastic. That means that he's incorporated them into the plot. We've seen how he's been able to balance ensemble cast, right? Not just through the Three Guardians films, but also with the Suicide Squad. So I trust his ability to do that. And of course, Peacemaker, of course, as far as like his ensemble casting in that as well. So I buy his ability to balance all of these characters, right? For all the people that are, the standard fan complaint of, oh, there's too many heroes, there's too many characters, there's too many powered characters, his movie's going to be overstuffed. Yeah, that nonsense. Whatever. I buy that he can balance all of that. But I'm very intrigued by Ida Gathegi's Mr. Terrific being such a big part of this. It really does remind me of Zack Snyder telling us that Cyborg was the heart and soul of Zack Snyder's Justice League. And that certainly turned out to be the case for that film, so I'm very intrigued to see how this plays out with Ida Gathegi being such a big part of Superman. This is another big one that I think we kind of already knew, but the influence of All-Star Superman and other DC media, because it says Gunn is adamant that as much as the film is influenced by previous cinematic incarnations of Superman, it's also very different from the likes of Richard Donner's Superman and Zack Snyder's Man of Steel. In fact, if any one piece of DC media influenced Gunn's Superman, it's Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's seminal graphic novel, All-Star Superman. If I mispronounce Frank's last name, I'm sure one of you will tell me. But at any rate, it says, quote, I think that all previous DC media influenced me, Gunn says. I think that obviously the original Donner movie influenced me, but there's also a lot of things that this isn't. Like I'm just making a Donner-type movie. It's very different from that. Zack Snyder did some excellent stuff, so there's a lot of ways that influenced me. There's a lot of ways in which the DC... Time out. I need to read that line again. This is from James Gunn, people. James Gunn said, quote, Zack did some excellent stuff, so there's a lot of ways that influenced me. Did you hear that, people? All of you that want to still claim that there's this animosity between James Gunn and Zack Snyder, shut your face. We've been telling you for the last couple of years, shut your face. Now really shut your face. You're not going to, but still. Let's continue on with this quote. He says there's a lot of ways in which the DC animated universe influenced me. And there's a lot of stuff from the comic books above and beyond anything else, All-Star Superman, that influenced me more than anything. To take that sort of Silver Age feel, that sort of science fiction approach to it with gadgets, Lex is really sort of a sorcerer in a way, Lex Luthor. He's a scientist, but he's so good at science, and I think of him as like a sorcerer. Gunn continues, so everything influenced me, and then it's just something that's completely us. The relationship between David and Rachel's characters on screen is something I don't think we've seen in, I hate to say stuff like this, but I don't think it's something we've ever seen in any superhero movie ever. All right. While I hope he's right about that last one, that is kind of the, and that's why he said I hate to say stuff like this, because it totally sounds like movie producer speak. Like the first thing that pops in your head is, his thoughts on The Flash, which, we know how that panned out. I enjoy that movie. I own it, but we know how that panned out, overall with respect to that. So, not that I think he's lying and not that I think he's just doing producer speak. No, I think as a director, he does believe this. Whether or not the rest of us agree with him remains to be seen. And it is kind of unfair. Actually, it's very unfair because a lot of us are going to be, whether we want to or not, the subjectivity is going to come into play. We're going to be judging David Corenswet and Rachel Brosnahan's Lois and Clark relationship. We're going to be judging it based on our favorite versions and all the other versions that we've seen. And we may not necessarily mean to do that, but there's going to be a sizing up, seriously. And it doesn't have to be from big screen either. There could definitely be some influence, like if you're a big fan of Dean Cain and Terry Hatcher, like Scott is at Squadcast Media, or now a fan of Tyler Hoechlin and Bitsy Tulloch, like Brent most certainly is, and also Scott is as well, with Superman and Lois, right, that just ended. Or for me, like I grew up with Reeve and Margot Kidder. Margot Kidder is still kind of my Lois. Actually, no, she still definitely is my Lois Lane. She's the one that I grew up on if I were to pick a Lois Lane. And that's nothing against Amy Adams, right, whatsoever. It's nothing against Terry Hatcher or Dana Delaney in animated form. It's nothing against any of the Loises. It's just we all have a preference, all of us, on some level. And whether we mean to or not, we're going to judge the new characters by our favorite version. We just are, right? There are people who love Amy Adams. That's their Lois. They're going to judge Rachel the same way by that, whether they mean to or not. It's just all about being fair with respect to a new interpretation, and it doesn't have to be our new favorite, but let's just see how different this one is and how organic this one becomes, right? And speaking of the Lois Clark dynamic, it says next why the Lois Clark dynamic is different. It says, When asked to elaborate on why the Lois-Clark dynamic is so different in the movie, Gunn hinted that we'll see new sides to their relationship as the film explores what it's like for a crusading reporter to strike up a friendship with a powerful alien from another world. Quote, "It's a complicated relationship and we really get into it, and there's long scenes that are about the relationship and the way they relate and what it would be like for a person who's this incredibly intelligent, strong-headed, stubborn, skeptical journalist to have a relationship with someone who can lift a skyscraper." And then it says, does that mean Lois knows Superman's secret identity? Gunn was cagey on that question, it says, though he did confirm that unlike Superman and Lex, the two have an existing relationship coming into the movie. Well, we'll see, Gunn teases. She knows who Superman is. So, all right, we'll see how that goes. But yeah, what he says about this, I'm very intrigued to see what is different. I'm very intrigued to see his take on all this. That's the cool part about reboots, right? To see a character through fresh eyes, to see characters and dynamics through fresh eyes, for sure. This next one, Superman doesn't seek to set up other projects. Well, that's inherently already good in that regard. But it says there's a lot riding on Superman as the first foundational pillar of a new cinematic universe. Yes, we totally know this about their roadmap and whatnot. But it says every scene in the film is there to serve the film, and there won't be many moments that overtly lay seeds for other DCU projects. And here's the quote. Gunn says, zero. I mean, maybe two little things, two moments, but basically if something's there to just set something else up, F it. I even say that, Gunn says. And for all I know, those things can be cut by the time we get to the editing room because something has to exist for this movie. And if that works in tandem with setting up characters that exist in other media, then that's great. If this sets up stuff in Peacemaker, which it does, then that's great. But that is never, ever, ever with me going to be something that I'm going to sacrifice even a moment or a beat in the story for, especially a movie. With TV, you've got a little bit more leniency to be able to do that, but in a movie, every beat has to be there for the movie itself. He says Gunn explains that he wants the movie to be able to stand on its own feet without moviegoers needing to worry about having seen anything else prior or wondering what comes next. He teased that future DCU movies may start to include more teases for the wider DCU, but ultimately the goal remains the same. Quote, "Everything needs to stand by itself," Gunn says. "I don't want somebody to have to go see this movie and be relying on anything else. Now listen, once we get down the line that may change a little bit," he says. "In Guardians, what did you have to see in Guardians 3 to really understand it? You'd be better off seeing the first two Guardians, but even Infinity War, the characters explained it in an elevator, the whole plot. It's like trying to keep things as simple as possible so that you don't have to have homework, especially TV shows that some people aren't into." And then Gunn continues, "Now, are seeds being planted? Yes, there's seeds being planted, but that's never going to be the predominant thing in any scene for me. It's always about getting to the next scene. What's in the moment? How are we making this movie the best we can be? And it's going to stay like that as much as I can possibly make it like that." Now, I'm going to tell you right there, that whole section, that entire section, you can just go ahead and call that the "I'm not Kevin Feige, this isn't the MCU 2.0 section." You can say that. Because if he pulls that off, if he absolutely does everything that he says in those paragraphs and those quotes, then that's precisely what this is. It will be not the MCU. It will be not Kevin Feige. And yeah, that's the challenge at this point in time, right? Because as far as successful shared cinematic universes, the biggest model that everybody has is the MCU. And in many ways, I mean, there are so many pieces that have been written over the last number of years about how MCU movies are just trailers to set up the next movie, right? Which is a really damning thing to say about the MCU. And I personally don't agree with that, even though I see where people come from with that argument, especially with some of the lesser movies, subjectively speaking, in the MCU. But Gunn is flat out saying, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. The story has to be served on its own and stand on its own 2 feet within this universe. That's what I want to do, right? So, listen, if he pulls that off, if that's actually how this goes, because here's the problem. As autonomous as DC Studios is, because it's its own studio and it's no longer a rinky-dink division under Warner Brothers Picture Group, you're still going to have input from the big boss. You're still going to have input from some people or suggestions, right? And even though Gunn and Safran are the bosses, it could even be Safran as the producing partner that goes, well, maybe we need this or maybe we need that, right? And that might be a conversation that is had. We can't say that it won't. But if Gunn sticks to most of what he says in that section here, then bravo. And I will be very excited to see how the DCU pulls that off, especially since we know pretty much at this point that the general audience doesn't care that much about homework. Again, I've brought up many times before about how I know people, coworkers, right? My favorite coworker at work, seriously, who works with me, she saw Infinity War. I brought this up before. She watched Infinity War by itself, enjoyed the film, and had absolutely no inclination to watch Endgame. She was perfectly fine with the ending of the movie. She liked the movie. She enjoyed Infinity War. Still, to this day, has not watched Endgame. And there are people who have only watched the Avengers movies, did not watch all the other movies in between, did not see any of the build-up, even though it wasn't really build-up, it was just teases, whatever. My point is, the general audience does not care nearly as much as we do when it comes to the interconnectivity and setting things up down the road. So, if he's sticking to story and really trying to draw in the audience with story, also knowing that the general audience really doesn't care about homework in the first place, we're good. Seriously, this is a good thing. Anthony, Brooklyn Batman, is correct so far. I completely agree. He is so far saying all the right things with respect to this, except for that one thing that he said about trying to make Superman's suit serious being silly. That's the only thing he said so far that I really disagree with. But here's the last thing in this IGN piece. It says why the title changed. He said early on Gunn's Superman carried the title Superman Legacy before it was shortened to simply Superman. Gunn reveals that while the film certainly still explores the legacy theme, he decided early in production that the simpler approach was the right one. Quote, "We do this thing called the pre-mortem before we start shooting. You ever hear of this? It's great. We go into a room with me and all the department heads and we say, let's say this movie is a colossal F-up. We find out 2 years from now when this movie comes out, it goes terribly wrong. What are we doing right now that we're not talking about that's making this movie wrong? It gives a chance for all the parties involved to speak their mind, whether it's about the script, whether it's about the casting, whether it's about how departments are communicating with each other. Everybody is allowed, from transportation to whatever, they're all allowed to say what they think. And I found it extremely helpful." He continues, "And one of the things was I thought about maybe the title had a looking back feeling about it. And this isn't about looking back. This is about looking forward. So, although when you see the movie, you'll understand where Legacy comes from because it is, again, about Clark and his relationship to his Kryptonian parents and his relationship to his human parents and whose legacy is he really. And so, it's about that." And so there you have it. And that, you know what, that whole thing, what did he call it? He said it was called the pre-mortem. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think more movie productions should do exactly what he's talking about, right? Because you hear a lot of stories in Hollywood about productions and about people not speaking their minds and things that, you know, weren't said that people thought, right? And they just let it go, and the movie was made, and, you know, things weren't addressed that they could be doing, and there wasn't that open door policy. There wasn't that type of, you know, openness to speak their mind, you know, because of who was directing or because of who was producing or because of what studio it was or because of the deadline that they were under. Whatever the reasons were, I think we've heard enough stories over the years about people that didn't speak up and just things went the way that they did and the movies went the way that they did and didn't do as well as they could have or flat out bombed in that regard, right? And so the pre-mortem idea that he's talking about, I like that. I think that's something that probably should be adapted for damn near every movie production, like going forward in Hollywood. That's a fantastic idea. And I imagine he's not the only one that does it. I got to believe some other filmmakers do it more than likely, but still, that's awesome. I like hearing that, you know, and that's what essentially led to, you know, like his idea of dropping Legacy from the title, even though, as he says, you know, Legacy is going to feature prominently in the film. So there you have it with respect to the 10 things that IGN learned on their set visit. Some really good stuff and some really nice insight from James Gunn directly, to be honest with you, that I personally really appreciate, you know, even with maybe some minor details here and there that maybe some people may not have wanted to know, but no major details, nothing major with the plot or anything like that. The other piece that I saw comes from IO9, and it's 15 things that we learned from James Gunn on the set of Superman, by another writer that I personally do not care for, Jermaine Lucier. I think that's how you pronounce his name. And I'm not big on Gizmodo.com or IO9 either, but a lot of this is the same stuff that, you know, Gunn told IGN on their set visit. He talked to everybody, but there's a couple of different things. Here's one thing that IO9 Gizmodo.com adds, and that is action scenes were filmed mid-air. It says, since Superman can fly, Gunn wanted there to be incredible action not just on the ground, but in the air too. To do so, they took inspiration from some very cool movies and pushed other technologies forward. Quote, being able to shoot stuff in the sky is really hard. So we took a lot from films like Top Gun Maverick, Gunn said. We shoot a lot of our action with actual drones flying in and around Superman and the people that he's flying with, the engineer and whoever else that he's fighting up in the air. And we did that on sound stages. We've got these really small, crazy drones now. We've got some of the best flyers in the world here who are working with it. Okay, now that's exciting. We haven't necessarily heard him talk about the action sequences and the flying, if you will. Drones that are like in midair surrounding them. Oh, I can't wait to see those camera angles. I wonder how much of that we will see in the teaser trailer. I'm not expecting a ton, but that's exciting. That is very intriguing because I don't know that that's ever been done with respect to using drone photography to film Superman, flying action like in midair like that. That sounds innovative. That sounds very exciting. I am very intrigued to hear about that, to be honest with you. That's nice. That's really, really nice. So that's a cool detail to derive from this piece. And I guess that's really it. The majority of this, is really just the same stuff that IGN did. So, they were all there in the same set visits and they all published their stories. The Wrap had one too, but you know how I feel about the Wrap. They can, go sit and spin as far as I'm concerned. But there you have it. Set visit intel with full quotes and explanations from James Gunn, the architect himself. And, I have to agree with Brooklyn Batman, Anthony. Anthony, he says that so far he's saying all the right things. And listen, that doesn't mean that, we just trust him implicitly, right? There is still the cautious optimism, but I am giving him, like I said, a little bit more benefit of the doubt than others will, because I do think there are aspects of this that he understands that some people don't understand, right? The people that just expect that this is going to be a Superman version of Guardians of the Galaxy or the Suicide Squad. No, I don't think it's going to be that. I take him at his word when he says it's going to be more serious. I take him at his word when he says that the inspiration comes more from All-Star Superman and not just from the movies. Because again, he is a student of the comics. And I do believe comics lore plays a big part with respect to it. And I think he understands, truthfully, that Superman is a very different, stronger, and more historically vibrant character than any of the ones that he's done feature films with. And as I've said from the beginning, the hope is that this becomes his magnum opus. Right now, I'm on the island of people that believe that the Suicide Squad is currently his magnum opus. And I've enjoyed, I enjoy Guardians 1 and 3 very much. 2 is still not really high on my list, but I don't hate it anymore. But I really like what he did with the Suicide Squad. I really like a lot of the artistic touches and a lot of the stuff that he did with his Suicide Squad film, right? But this is a whole different ball game when you're dealing with the Man of Steel himself, when you're dealing with this character, and when you're dealing with this legacy and history, and trying to make a new version of that going forward, especially with all the pressure of DC Studios, with all the pressure of the beginning of the DCU, and certainly the pressure of the fact that, once again, this is only going to be the third time that we will have seen a different Superman interpretation on the big screen in our lifetimes. Can you believe that, people? Still, since 1978, 3 versions of Superman for the big screen, and we're about to see the third one. That is ridiculous on so many levels, right? We've had how many Batman? 6 or 7, cinematically speaking, since 1966. We've had 3 Spider-Man cinematically since 2002, right? So Superman definitely has some catching up to do, and, but that's all the pressure. It's all the extra added pressure, and I get it. It does sound like James Gunn is taking this very seriously as he can with respect to the weight and pressure of the production. The marketing is starting to ramp up, right? We're going to see that teaser trailer on Thursday. We're going to get it going. The hype is starting to build slowly but surely, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll see how everybody feels about it, and we'll definitely have plenty to discuss with it going forward. But let it begin. We're almost just half a year away. We are close to being a half year away from this film releasing on July 11th, 2025. So buckle up. Going to be an interesting ride up until then. And for now, that will do it for this particular episode of the Flightcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget, Thursday, when that trailer drops, there will be an episode of Flight Alert. I will watch it, and I will ingest it, and I will process it as best as I can as a fan, and then I will absolutely give you my honest thoughts on the first teaser trailer for Superman in all of its glory as we see it this past Thursday. It'll probably drop when I'm at work, something like that, right? And it'll spread like wildfire. Like somebody will probably send me a link, or I'll find it and I'll tell others, and it'll it'll spread, and we'll definitely see it, and we'll definitely react to it, and we'll definitely have a lot of thoughts and a lot of great conversation, hopefully, going forward about it. But thank you so much for listening to this show. Thank you so much for supporting the Flightcast. If you have thoughts on this, and you definitely want them read on the eventual catch-up episode of Flight Chat that is totally going to happen in the not-too-distant future. Hopefully, maybe I can do one before Christmas. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe the Christmas holiday would be a good time to do it, like end of the year. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But either way, you know where to find me on Blue Sky at Flightcast. That's where I'm at now. Blue Sky at Flightcast. There's also still the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. And there's also the YouTube page, because I know Amari and a couple of others I think have commented on the YouTube page before for this episode. So there's that as well, the Flightcast on youtube.com for sure. And once again, just a reminder for the holiday season for Patreon members, yes, 12 Days of Flight Review is continuing. We've done 5 Christmas movies so far. There's 7 more to go. Every day leading all the way up to Christmas Eve. Stay tuned for that at patreon.com/theflightcast. Hope that you've been enjoying it, and hope you enjoy the new reviews. Remember, the new movie that I've never seen before is tomorrow, and then the day after that is the movie that I hated that many of you loved, and it's probably going to break some of your hearts that at any point in time I would have hated this particular Christmas movie, but you'll have to wait and see on Thursday at patreon.com/theflightcast to find out which one it is. So until then, and until our next episode when we talk about the Superman trailer, the first teaser trailer on Thursday, take care, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all next time. Take it easy.